The Cincinnati Reds are going to have a hard time finding wins at Chavez Ravine this weekend, especially if the lineup disappears like it did against the Guardians. But is there a path to a series win?
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all platforms. I am Stephen Offenbaker alongside Jeff Carr, and we have a passion for baseball. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds, and we have turned that passion into information for you. On today's podcast, we have a crossover edition of the show with the Locked On Dodgers host, Jeff Snider. We are going to preview the Reds' four-game series out in Los Angeles. So without further ado, let's get right to it.
All right, we are here with Jeff Snider from Locked On Dodgers. This is Jeff Carr and Stephen Offenbaker from Locked On Reds. We're going to cross over. We're going to talk about this four-game set in Chavez Ravine. We got Jackie Robinson Day on Friday. It's a big weekend for the Reds and the Dodgers, a former great rivalry. I don't necessarily know that we're talking about much of a rivalry, especially when you're talking about this season. It really looks like David versus Goliath because, well, the Dodgers, they like to win and they like to pay for wins, and they're good at doing that, and they're good at building teams that do that. And the Reds are like, hey, if we can not pay for wins and still win, then maybe we could, try that. Anyway, let's start first, though, with the big topic, Jeff, because Clayton Kershaw was masterful. In fact, some might use that P word, but then he didn't get to finish the game. What's going on over there?
It's a hard situation. I am the biggest Clayton Kershaw fan in the world, literally and figuratively. Size-wise, you put me next to every other Clayton Kershaw fan, I'm bigger than them, and I love him more. I would have loved to see a Clayton Kershaw perfect game, but it was never going to happen. Like, nobody throws a complete game in their first start of the season. Hardly ever. I would guess the last one was probably Kershaw in 2013. Maybe somebody's thrown a perfect game in his first start of the season since then, but it doesn't happen very often. And then you throw in, this is a guy who's been on the injured list the last 5 seasons, who's coming off a season-ending injury last year, didn't pick up a ball until January, had a shortened spring training, and it's 36 degrees. The fact
you can't put a roof on the Minnesota state.
Oh,
like, come on,
gosh,
what was that?
Somebody deserves to be fired for that. But the reason you have a plan coming into a game like this, the reason you sit down with Kershaw and say, hey, you know what, for your first start this year, we want to get you to 80, 85 pitches. You make that plan together. And the reason for that is you have a plan for the whole season. Your plan to keep Kershaw relatively healthy all year so he can be healthy in October. That's the goal. And to throw away a smart, well thought out plan for a 20% chance of making history, personal history, doesn't make sense to me, especially when you factor in what Kershaw said after the game, that the last inning or two, he thought his slider sucked. And so, it's unlikely he was going to complete the perfect game anyway. And he's already at the pitch count you set, and there's 2 innings left. Do you really want to exceed his best case scenario? And he throws the perfect game. He just threw 25 or 30 more pitches than you planned on, coming off injury, bad weather, shortened spring training, all those things we mentioned. And worst case scenario, it gets broken up in the ninth and he threw 25 more pitches than you planned on, and he doesn't even get the history, And so, as much as I would have loved, I still, June 18th, 2014, Clayton Kershaw's no-hitter that should have been a perfect game if Hanley Ramirez knew how to play shortstop. That is still a great day for me. I know that date. My wife spent 11 and a half months making a cross stitch of Clayton Kershaw standing with his arm in the air on the mound after he threw that no-hitter. Like, I am a huge Clayton Kershaw fan. I would have loved to see the perfect game. It was never going to happen. And Dave Roberts and Clayton Kershaw sat down together in the dugout after the 6th inning and had that conversation and decided together that it wasn't going to happen. So let's do one more inning and call it a day. Kershaw was at peace with that decision. Roberts was at peace with the decision. And the only people, and honestly, I think people who care about the Dodgers' success this season in general are fine with the decision. And it's people, the unbiased observers, the ones who, I just want to see a good game. I don't care who wins. Well, of course you want the guy to go for the perfect game. I want Clayton Kershaw to be standing on the mound at the end of the World Series, you know?
I think that's probably a really great way to lay that out. And I know, like you mentioned, the non-Dodgers fans that are just baseball fans. We have a lot of them in Reds country that talk about Kershaw starts and root for him and any start that's not against Cincinnati. And I think that you really hit the key point there, which is, would you rather Kershaw have a perfect game in April and run the risk of not having him in October, or would you rather have him for a potential World Series run? And I bet if you ask him the question directly like that, would you rather have a World Series ring or a perfect game? He's going to say World Series ring every time.
And he basically said as much after the game. He said that I know what we're trying to do here. It would have been selfish for me to try to keep going. In fact, his only reason that he said that he would have liked to stay in was so that Austin Barnes could catch a no-hitter, because that's pretty cool. Like that, this is a ultimate team player. Yeah. You know, even Clayton Kershaw's postseason struggles in his career have been because he was being the ultimate team player. He was going on short rest. He was pitching deeper into a game because Don Mattingly didn't trust his bullpen. All those things. Clayton Kershaw is the ultimate team player. And we saw it today, and people see it. You know, Fergie Jenkins didn't like it. Well, shut up, Fergie Jenkins. Clayton Kershaw's better than you. You know, bottom line. And yeah, so it was a very selfless decision that Kershaw helped Roberts make.
Well, it was interesting because the Reds had a young lefty on the mound yesterday that kind of had the opposite effect. Like looking at two guys who throw from the left side of the mound and are really going to be important for their teams in different ways. Kershaw is going to be leading the Dodgers to a World Series this year. I firmly believe that. When it comes to Nick Lodolo, it's probably going to take a few years for him to be a part of a Reds World Series team. And we saw that over the last couple of days, the way that this lineup is hitting and the way that the bullpen, it's a young bullpen. This isn't the same yard sale bullpen that we had last year in Cincinnati, but there's still going to be some struggles. And with that, we are betting on the bullpen in game one. We'll talk about pitching matchups and things like that here in a few minutes. But coming into this series, the Reds are kind of looking way up at the Dodgers. Honestly, they're kind of looking in-house to make sure that they get their consistency rolling. And here they are going out to LA to face just a crazy buzzsaw.
You know, if we can come away from this Dodgers, I mean, I'm going to be honest. If we come out of this Dodgers series without getting swept, if we can steal one in LA, yeah, I'll consider it a success. The way things are going right now, the disruption that we have in the lineup, the uncertainty at third base, the inconsistency in the bullpen, the inconsistency with the young starters. If we get one win in Los Angeles, I will be happy to get the hell out of there and head to San Diego. I mean, seriously.
And I promise, Jeff, we are not just being nice because this is the first time you're talking to Steve.
should we just agree on a 3-1 series and call it a day? You know,
all right. This has been locked. No, I'm kidding.
Obviously, I prefer a sweep, but I'll take 3 wins out of the next 4. You know, it'll be interesting. There's it's a cliche to say there's a reason the game's not played on paper, but like most cliches, that's true. You know, and the Dodgers lost the series to the Rockies this past weekend, despite the fact that the Dodgers are a significantly better team than the Rockies. The Dodgers lost the series. And so anything can happen, but I definitely have my fingers crossed that the thing we expect to happen happens.
You know, Jeff, you look at this team day in and day out, this Dodger team that, as you mentioned, if you look at them on paper, they don't have a weakness. There's really not any particular area you can point at and say they really need to go out and work on that. But as a guy that watches them every day, and we're not just talking about on paper now, you see the actual product. What is the best avenue to attack this team? Is there a weakness there that you don't just readily see if you're looking at the stat sheets?
You know, there's definitely weaknesses. The Dodgers starting pitching right now is a little bit questionable. Walker Buehler pitched pretty darn well on opening day. And obviously Andrew Heaney and Clayton Kershaw both pitched well in Minnesota. But one of those names I just said was Andrew Heaney. And so it's a question mark there, you know, as well as he pitched on Tuesday, you know, I don't know that I would expect him to pitch that well again. I hope he does, but you know, and Julio Urias, who won 20 games last year, went 20-3. He was terrible in his first start against the Rockies. And so, you know, obviously that's in Colorado. You never know what to make of a bad start in Colorado. And then the the start in between those, or the other starter, is Tony Gonsolin with Tyler Anderson piggybacking. Both of those guys have potential to be really good, but there's question marks there. And so right now, while they're waiting for Trevor Bauer's situation to be resolved, however that's going to happen, and trying to figure out what their starting rotation is going to be, I'd say that is, if not a weak spot, at least a potential glimmer of hope for Reds fans. You have to watch where else you're going to go. But and then the other thing is you've got Cody Bellinger, who right now, former MVP Cody Bellinger has had 2 bad seasons in a row and is well on his way to a third. Although he did on Wednesday, he had a double and a homer, his first 2 extra base hits of the season. But, he is not MVP Cody Bellinger right now. And Justin Turner doesn't look quite right. Max Muncy did hit a home run, so maybe he's going to be okay. He hasn't looked quite right yet. A lot of the offense hasn't totally clicked yet. It started to click in Minnesota. 7 runs each game in the 2 games in Minnesota. Things started to click, but the offense, it wouldn't shock me if the Dodgers offense struggles in a game or 2 of this series.
Coming up, we're going to tell you why Hunter Greene is the pitcher that worries the Dodgers the most. And yeah, we're talking Hunter Greene over Tyler Mahle. We're going to tell you why that's an interesting bet. And if you're looking for an interesting bet, head on over to betonline.net. They've got all of the sports info, props, odds, and lines that you can handle, and so much more. BetOnline.net has you covered when it comes to baseball. Plus, we've got the NBA playoffs that are coming up here in a few days. You can jump in on that action there. The NHL is rolling toward its playoff season. Playoff hockey, man. I mean, what's better than that? Well, okay, maybe playoff baseball, but I'm a little biased there. Anyway, BetOnline.net has you covered for all of that great stuff. And you don't want to miss any of the offers that they have for you. They've got a lot of great offers every single season. That's betonline.net. Next time you're looking for a prop, an odd, a line on whatever sport you want to cover. I mean, we're talking about even boxing, UFC, WWE. They've got Vegas casino games as well. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. When you're done listening to our episode here with Jeff Snider, make sure you go check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Lindsey Crosby has you covered when you're talking about the minor leagues and even college baseball. It's Locked On MLB Prospects, just like Locked On Reds, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on tomorrow's episode, we are going to recap, and it's going to be like tomorrow afternoonish. I mean, hey, this is a West Coast road trip. You don't want to hear me talk at 2 a.m. You certainly don't want to hear Steve talk at 2 a.m. So we're going to talk the day after about what goes on in this bullpen game for the Redlegs against Walker Buehler. That's coming up tomorrow, but let's jump back into the conversation and let's talk some pitching and why Hunter Greene is so scary for Dodger fans. It might be interesting to see in game 1 because the Reds are going to kind of throw the bullpen at this thing. Rebar Sanmartin was supposed to start, but I think what they're going to do is use Luis Cessa as an opener, at least for the first inning, maybe first 2 innings, depending on how well he pitches, because Sanmartin had a bit of struggles there in the second inning against Atlanta and had a whole bunch of walks. So they're going to try and bolster him and help him out a little bit and mix things up with this Dodger lineup in game 1 going up against Walker Buehler. It's going to be interesting to see about that. When you looked at Walker Buehler's first start, what do you think really stood out the most?
I mean, basically, other than being stretched out, he looked like, is it classic Walker Buehler thing? Is he old enough to have classic Walker Buehler? Basically, he looked like last year's version of Walker Buehler. He looked really good. He had 1 inning that he gave up a few singles and a couple runs came in. Easily could have only been 1 run. And other than that, he pitched 5 innings and looked really good in 4 of them. And, he grew up a Reds fan. So maybe his love for Bronson Arroyo will do something in this series. But,
well, he and I got something in common there.
Wow. You and I have the same first name, but not the same opinion about Bronson Arroyo, apparently. Man, I got to diverge. The Dodgers home opener last year when they got their World Series rings, and every player had a video message from his childhood favorite player. And Walker Buehler's was Bronson Arroyo, and Bronson Arroyo played a song on his guitar and sang. And a lot of people liked it. I was in the stadium, and I believe it was the worst thing that ever happened at Dodger Stadium. And there have been some bad things that have happened at Dodger Stadium. I think that was the worst.
I did
But
not
anyway,
know we were getting this hot takey on today's episode. This is good.
Walker Buehler is a very good pitcher, and I expect him to be ready to go 6 or 7 innings and look about like he looked last year when he was a Cy Young finalist.
I think a guy like that, I mean, he sounds like a dude who pitched back in the 40s, so he can be a classic Walker Buehler. I like watching Walker Buehler pitch. So as a whole, that's probably the best, I think the most lopsided matchup in favor of the pitching for the Dodgers. Saturday is going to be intriguing. You kind of talked about not Gonsolin, but Julio Urias. Yeah. Urias going up against Hunter Greene. Hunter Greene got his first start in Atlanta, and it's like, okay, you're going to make your major league debut against the defending World Series champion and the likely World Series champion for your first 2 starts. Congratulations. So he gets to pitch in Dodger Stadium, and he was always a big Dodgers fan growing up. So it's going to be just a huge emotional moment for him. I'm intrigued to see how he responds to all of that. When you look at the Reds' probable starters, who is the one? Is Hunter Greene the guy that you are most not worried about? But when you look at that matchup, do you wonder about the Dodgers lineup, or who is it?
Yeah, Hunter Greene is definitely the one you circle in this series. I watched his start in Atlanta. He looked really good, looked very poised for a guy making his major league debut. Obviously did give up a couple home runs. He's, and that happens a lot with guys with really good fastballs. Sometimes they maybe depend too much on the fastball, and the Dodgers are good fastball hitters. I think it's a fun matchup to see Hunter Greene pumping 101, 102 miles an hour. And I don't know if he hit 102, but he was, 100, 101. Yeah. And seeing that against this Dodgers lineup, I think is going to be a ton of fun. And I think Julio is going to have to step up and be a lot better than he was in Colorado, because I don't think the Dodgers are going to score a ton of runs on Saturday.
Jeffrey, as much as I agree with Jeff that the Hunter Greene matchup is the fun one, it's the one that's going to kind of be interesting to watch and just see how Hunter Greene handles the bright lights of Hollywood, so to speak. I think, I've said before, Hunter Greene is unafraid and he's going to go out there and he's going to do his thing. But I think the real pitching matchup, the one that I'm most interested to see, is Road Mahle. And if Tyler Mahle can go out there and shut down this Dodger lineup, because that's the start, that's the game, that's the one I think the Reds are going to get. That's the one of the series I think they're going to take.
Yeah, it was annoying to see that home Mahle kind of cropped up in a weird way on Reds opening day when they opened up against the Guardians at home. I think that some of that had to do with the error that he committed there, and it kind of threw him off timing wise. But overall, I still believe that he's going to normalize his splits. He had crazy home road splits this last year, but something about getting out of Great American Ballpark really fires him up. And I know that I'm trying to remember, I think it was the first series they faced the Dodgers in Chavez Ravine last year. Tyler Mahle actually pitched really well in that game, if I remember right. And I probably should have looked up the box score before I started talking about it. But it was a game in which I saw Tyler Mahle pitch pretty well. And then you got Vladimir Gutierrez bouncing back after a little bit, not a super rough start in Atlanta. He had a couple of bad luck things go against him. So how is he going to respond on Friday there against Gonsolin? That might be the highest scoring game overall, because I think the Dodgers might, Buehler might shut down the Reds on Tuesday or on Thursday. But I think the 2 pitchers overall, I think we're going to see a lot of runs on Friday.
That Tyler Mahle game at Dodger Stadium that you're talking about was last April. And yeah, he pitched 5 innings and only allowed 1 run. And the Reds ended up winning that game. Later in the game, he got a no decision. But the thing that the Dodgers will do to you, he lasted 5 innings and he threw 97 pitches. Yes. And he only walked 2 guys. It's not like he was walking everybody, but the Dodgers will work counts. And that was something they didn't really do in Colorado. They only had 6 walks in the 3 games of Colorado. But then on Tuesday against the Twins, they had 9 walks. should have been 10, except that the umpire was really bad at his job, Jerry Meals, if you can imagine.
No, not him.
and then on Wednesday, they didn't have as many walks, but Chris Paddock only lasted 4 innings and threw close to 80 pitches because they were just working counts, getting deep in counts, getting into hitters counts. And that's what the Dodgers really do. And so I know it's been a year, and I know Tyler Mahle had a really good season last year. And so I don't know if that's a common issue with him of throwing too many pitches, but it's something that the Dodgers can do to a guy. And no matter how well you pitch, if they have you out in the 4th or 5th inning, that kind of makes the things a lot tougher for the bullpen to get through the rest of the game.
On the flip side of what you're saying with the Dodgers offense and them being able to take a lot of pitches and work a lot of counts and run up those pitch counts, the Reds offense right now is really struggling to find itself. We've got Mike Moustakas, who's probably looked the worst that I've ever seen him look in his career, to the point where I really think that if this continues another game or two, David Bell should consider setting him down. He should be done. This experiment should be over. I talked with Jeffrey off air that they could bring up a guy we have in AAA right now named Alejo Lopez, who there's absolutely no way he could play worse than Moustakas is playing right now. So there's a hole there. We've had a problem with our outfielders getting going. Tommy Pham has yet to record a hit, although he has gotten on base. Nick Senzel's been playing an amazing outfield, but he hasn't got it going yet. Aristides Aquino is Aristides Aquino. Potential to run into one, but big giant hole in his swing, and everybody takes advantage of it. So that list goes on and on and on. Votto hasn't got hot. India has played respectable, and Tyler Stevenson has played well, but they have not really gelled. They haven't gotten hot. So it is my hope that we come out to Los Angeles and get into the sunshine and the great weather, and along with the temperatures, this Reds offense catches fire as well.
Well, and it's nice. They get to face Walker Buehler in the first game, so that should help.
Yeah, they'll have to wait like 24 hours or something like that. Now, when I look at this offense, I'm with you. Moose and Aquino both. I don't know that Aquino looks lost at the plate so much as Moose does. Moose swung at a bouncing ball at him. Like there was a curveball that bounced in front of him, and he swung at it for strike 3. Like there's so much about Moose's game right now that looks off is the kind word. So what do you do at third base? Because your next man up is Colin Moran, because Donovan Solano's on the IL, and you're talking about Jose Barrero on the IL, so you can't move Kyle Farmer around. I would love to see Kyle Farmer at third once Jose Barrero is healthy, but Jose Barrero ain't getting here till at least May. It's going to be really rough to see how the Reds kind of piece together this lineup with the dudes that they have on the injured list. And it's nice that Tyler Naquin kind of had a pretty decent 2-game set against the Guardians, but that was against right-handed pitching. Dude has struggled against left-handed pitching in his career, and he had a couple of hits so far this year against them, but overall, I don't trust him against a left-handed pitcher. And so long as the Dodgers have a left-handed pitcher on their roster, it's going to be interesting to see how the Reds bounce back, because they did well against Max Fried, but they haven't really been tested outside of that.
Coming up, the three of us are going to tell you whether or not it is possible for the Cincinnati Reds to steal a series victory in this 4-game set out at Dodger Stadium in Chavez Ravine. We're going to break it down coming up next. Make sure you are following us on Twitter. I am at S. Offenbaker. You can also follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. You can also follow the show at Locked On Reds. And don't forget to head over to the YouTube channel. If you are in our audio feeds, get over to YouTube, click that subscribe button. There's exclusive video content over there you are not going to want to miss. And if you're watching us on YouTube already, thank you very much. Big smile for you. Click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of the extras we're going to be posting throughout the 2022 baseball season. So without further ado, let's jump right back into our conversation with Jeff Snider, where we're going to tell you whether or not it's possible for your Cincinnati Reds to steal a series victory out in Los Angeles. Jeff, I have a question for you. The Reds have built themselves to really be a team of platoons. And they're very dependent on getting the right matchups. Jeff and I were talking off air before you came on, and wondering just how disruptive using Luis Cessa as an opener would be to this Dodger lineup and the matchups. Can you speak to your thoughts on that, whether or not there'll be some success there in creating some matchup advantage, or is this Dodger lineup just so potent that it's really not going to matter?
The Dodgers right now, I've actually been pleasantly surprised. They have not been very platoony so far this season. I know it's only 5 games, but basically they started Edwin Rios on the second game of the season. Mostly just, Dave Roberts said it was because he wanted to get him in against the righty, Herman Marquez. But I think a lot of it was just because somebody needed a day off, and you got to give these guys a chance sometimes. But, Gavin Lux is probably has the worst platoon splits of anybody in their starting lineup. He's started all 5 games, and they've only faced one lefty on opening day, and he had the biggest hit of that game. But everybody else, Cody Bellinger and Max Muncy are both lefties who hit lefties just fine. When Cody Bellinger's hitting anybody, he hits lefties as well as he hits righties, I should say. And then, Freddie Freeman is not a guy who's split heavy. The right-handers, Mookie Betts, Justin Turner, Trey Turner, those guys, they really don't have anybody who – I don't think the Dodgers are going to adjust their lineup at all based on using an opener, and they're not going to be throwing pinch hitters out there. The Dodgers really seem to have come into this season saying, this is our starting 9. And yeah, guys are going to get days off sometimes. And so some of these bench players, they only have 3 bench players. Right now they're carrying 16 pitchers, and so they have it's 2 bench players. They have their backup catcher, Austin Barnes, and then they have Hanser Alberto and Edwin Rios. And that's their bench. Wow. And so they're not going to be making that many decisions. Maybe you have, if there's a lefty situation, is Sessa a righty or lefty?
Righty.
Okay. So, maybe, I don't even know, because Hanser Alberto is definitely a guy who hits lefties better than he hits righties, and Rios definitely hits righties better than he hits lefties. And so maybe late in the game, but it's definitely not going to affect their game planning strategy at all.
I'm intrigued to see how David Bell manages that, and don't tempt him with a good time saying that the Dodgers are carrying 16 pitchers like that. He'll do that before you have a chance to blink your eye. But overall, when I look at how the Reds are set up in this series, I look up and down the Dodgers lineup, and it seems like 1 through 9, it's a tough out for the Reds right now. I mean, outside of Tyler Stevenson has been a tough out. Joey Votto has seen a lot of pitches, hasn't really caught fire just yet, but there's not a lot of guys. India, he's all right at the top of the lineup. Once you get past the first 4, maybe first 3 at this point, depending on who you're looking at, it might be a little bit rough. Who is, all right, let's say this. Who's the best Dodger hitter at the end of this season?
At the end of the season, I think that this is hard because there's
so many good
there's
ones.
A few legitimate possibilities. My guess would be either Mookie Betts or Trey Turner. But then my brain says, hey, stupid, you forgot Freddie Freeman. And then my brain says, hey, remember Max Muncy? And then my brain says, well, Gavin Lux is their best hitter so far. He's batting over 400, stupid. And my brain is really mean to me when you ask me this question, Jeff, is what I'm saying. So, I think Mookie Betts is the best player, the best hitter on the team. But, he wasn't last year. And so we'll see what happens. But if I had to put money on somebody, it would be Mookie Betts. But that's why, despite some sponsors of the Locked On Podcast Network, I'm not really a betting man because I don't know. Is that a good answer? I don't know. Is that good podcasting? I think this is good content, right?
You could almost just list all of the names and throw a dart, and you'd have probably just as much chance of being right because there's so much talent in that lineup. I mean, it's really hard to narrow it down. Whereas on the Cincinnati side of things, there's a couple names. It could be Jonathan India, it could be Joey Votto, it could be Tyler Stevenson. That's pretty much it. That's the list. Yeah,
and if I threw the dart and it landed on Cody Bellinger, people would laugh at me. But that dude won an MVP 3 years ago, and he's 20. I think he'll be 27. I think he was born right after I graduated high school. I think he's not even 27 years old yet. So he's in his prime. He won an MVP just 3 years ago. And so Cody Bellinger could very easily figure it out and be one of the best players in baseball again from now until the end of the season. And he's the guy who people would laugh at you if you picked him right now.
Yeah, the spin zone storyline for the Reds this year has been trying to catch lightning in a bottle. And if that's the case in comparison, well, the Dodgers are the lightning. If and there's like a small scenario that this even happens, but if the series goes 3-1 to the Reds, how's that happen?
I mean, obviously Hunter Greene and Tyler Mahle would both pitch really well and shut down the Dodgers offense. It's hard for me. Like, I know anything can happen. I know the Dodgers just lost a series to the Rockies. It's really hard for me to picture this series going to the Reds. Yeah, but anything can happen in a baseball game. You guys can struggle, and obviously it's almost a good thing, I guess, that Andrew Heaney is going up against Mahle. I think that's the last game, right? That Malle's pitching.
Yep. Sunday. Yeah.
And so that'll be against Andrew Heaney. And so, that could be a game like Steve was saying, that might be the one to circle for Reds fans, because Andrew Heaney still definitely has some question marks. We don't know what to expect from him. And Julio has some question marks after his start in Colorado. And then, you know what? Then the other game is Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson piggybacking, and both that I'd go so far as to say anything can happen in a game that Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson are pitching 7 of the innings. I think it's most likely that it goes the Dodgers' way that day, simply because the Dodgers do have a better offense than the Reds on paper. But I don't know that I would, again, I wouldn't put money on it, because I don't put money on things because I am not that committed to any of my beliefs.
Yeah,
Jeff, I think I'm along the same lines. It's really hard to find that third win in the series for the Reds. I can see it in the Hunter Greene game. I can see it in the Tyler Mahle game. But to find that third one, it's going to have to be just one of those flukes. It's going to have to be a weird error that breaks an inning open. It's going to have to be something that we just can't predict. It's going to be something has to go drastically wrong for the Dodgers, for the Reds to find that third win in the series. I think I agree with Jeff on that.
And those things happen in baseball. That's they happen all the time. And, in any given series, I'd say the Reds have a 30% chance of winning this series. And that means 3 out of 10 times it's going to happen, even though none of us right now can picture how it would happen. But it could easily happen. I really hope it doesn't. I'll be mad at you guys.
Yeah. So I think you guys are both saying 3-1. I'm going to go contrarian. I'm going to say 2-2. I don't feel strongly about that, because I feel like this is a really, really bad weekend for the Redlegs, and they have got to get the ship right, because they are floundering right now. And it's on the heels, as like you said, where Reds fans going to go. It's on the heels of some wonderful comments on opening day. So they've really got to figure some stuff out to keep fans interested, because their owner has already put the pressure on the players, where they already were feeling the whole lightning in the bottle pressure anyway. So yeah, I think a series split is like the optimistic hope of that. And overall, at the end of the day, it's going to be a tough one watching these 4 games unfold.
Well, I hope that Reds fans do come together behind this team, regardless of what the owner's son said. The fact is that we are fans of the players. We're not fans of the owners. And unfortunately, there's not a way to support the Reds that doesn't put money into the pockets of the people who don't care about Reds fans. And so that's frustrating. But, I hope, I don't know what it looks like for the Reds fans to be able to band behind this team in a way that actually is helpful. But I hope that you guys can figure it out, because Cincinnati is a great baseball town. It's like the original baseball town. It's a nice stadium there. I've only been there once, but I loved it. Really, it's a great baseball town, and Cincinnati deserves better than what it currently has. And hopefully, I don't think the trades that they made were terrible in a long-term view. It kind of sucks right now what they're going through. And I hope that it works. And I hope that at some point, Major League Baseball figures out a way to make it so that city teams don't have to crap on their cities and their fans for a couple of years at a time in order to be successful, or at least don't think they have to. I don't think they did have to do that. I understand why they think they did. But yeah, I other than this weekend and whenever the Dodgers go to Cincinnati, I wish nothing but the best for the Reds and Red fans. Like you said, it hasn't really been a rivalry since the 70s, probably since the Big Red Machine. And so until then, it's a bummer of a situation, and makes me glad that my team's owners like spending their money.
That's a good spot to end today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for watching the Locked On Reds podcast and making us your first listen of the day. Now go make Locked On MLB your second listen. As Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, though, has you covered with his unique perspective of Major League Baseball past and present. That's Locked On MLB, just like Locked On Reds, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Tomorrow afternoon, make sure you check out our reactions to Game 1 in Los Angeles, and as we look ahead to a weekend of baseball at Chavez Ravine for the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds might be in a little bit of a struggle right now, Steve, and with everything going on and all of the nastiness and things coming from the ownership side of things, people probably are wondering about our Cincinnati Reds. But when they talk about you and when they talk about me, what can they expect?
No matter what's going on in the baseball world, you can count on Jeff and I to be locked on Reds every single day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.